Thanks, Steve. Well, we're with both Moon and Dave. Dave is going to join us in a short while, but hi, good afternoon to Moon. How are you?
Hi, Peter. Hi, Steve. I'm great.
Goodo. Well, I think for everybody listening, just remind everybody about who you are and what you do, Moon. That's a good start, isn't it?
Yes. So my name is Moon. I'm based in Stourbridge, originally from China. I'm a mental fitness coach that works with what I call them high achieving, stressed out sales professions. So I help them to improve their performance, have better life, work balance, and sleep better. Who doesn't sleep better?
Sleep better is a good move at the minute, don't you think, Steve?
Well, I'm the wrong one because I can sleep at any time, and in fact, even at lunchtime today, the head of the ministry was next to me, and I said, "Can you let me know in 10 minutes' time?" And I fell asleep for 10 or 15 minutes. And even though I've got loads to do and loads in my head, I'm a professional sleeper.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
But I understand that there's lots of people who aren't and can't do it. So,
Well, myself included, Steve. So I think that's very lucky. I found it very difficult to fall asleep. Once I'm asleep, I'm okay. So
okay.
People that I work with, a lot of them have the same issue because they're working so much. And I think once your brain gets going, it's really difficult to slow down. It's like the motor just doesn't stop running. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. It's the session doesn't just talk about sleep. I'm not a sleep expert.
It's one of these images that they booked you for 2 hours, but they fell asleep after 5 minutes and asked for a refund for the hour and 55, isn't it?
Oh boy! Oh, there's so many jokes there, isn't there? Really. So tell us more about mental fitness and mental performance, Moon.
Yeah. So we have talked a lot about mental health, especially during these past 2 years, and I think people now have a much better understanding, awareness of what mental health is. So mental health is not the absence of mental illnesses. So mental fitness obviously is, if you think about your physical fitness, it's exactly that. So the more you exercise your muscles, the more you pay attention to your fixes, the more energy you put into making sure that you're physically healthy, the better you feel. So same as mental health. I guess my question always starts with, what are you doing every single day to contribute to a healthy mind, instead of ruminating issues on over issues or overthinking about things and worrying and stressing. So when I talk about mental fitness, it's a very broad sense of making sure that you are indeed taking care of your mind and your brain, and that you have practical tools that every single day you can follow through. So yeah, that's what I do. And I think it's a huge connection, I'm sure both of you would agree, between our mindset and how we see the world and how we feel about ourselves to our performance.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that.
Yeah, and I think without being too deep on it, somebody who was very important said to me a number of years ago that one of the biggest problems that society was going to have, and little did they know that the C word was going to come along, but they felt slightly responsible for creating a reliant society rather than a resilient one, because over a period of time, government measures and others had been brought up to make people reliant, and they did it as a way of getting power back for a while. The problem is, what you're trying to do is to make people more resilient and to overcome those issues of, freedom and independence, and to be able to control their mindset in the right way. And it's a large mountain to climb after 10 or 15 years of people persuading people the other way. So yeah, I think creating a resilient mindset and a resilient society as opposed to a reliant one is going to be a challenge universally for a long while, even more so after the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Well, that's beautifully put, Steve. And what I'm hearing is also agency, is this ability to take care of yourself and not to rely so much on external factors. not to rely on a lot of alcohol to get through your days, or substance and all of those things. And I think there's a taboo somewhere there. But a lot of the sales profession that I work with, myself was one of them, still is in a certain extent, is that we need a way to release that energy, from working in such a competitive environment. So how do we do that? How do we relax? We can't. It's really hard to relax, with this digital era when we just constantly connected. And, Peter, you were sending me emails last night at 9 p.m. and I was replying. So,
I know. I don't know who was worse, me doing it or you replying. But there you go.
Exactly. So I think I love what you said, Steve. I think it's really about resilience. It's about looking inwards and having this ability to know, okay, this challenging time ahead. This is indeed a very challenging time that we have never experienced before. What can I do? Like, how can I help myself? How can I help my family? And continue to put food in the fridge, like what you said, Peter, all the time. I love that. Every time I look at the fridge, I think about you when what you said.
Pleasure. Well, hopefully the fridge has got some food in it. That's the main thing.
Always
It depends what she's looking at, Peter, really, before you take it too much of a compliment.
Now. Yes, anyway. Scary beyond all reason. It's true, though, isn't it? That nearly stopped the conversation. It was close, but we're okay. We're still going. Anyway. How did you get into all this, Moon?
I started getting to coaching as an industry and actually as a client. I started as a client. So I was a coaching client to a coach in 2017. That was before pandemic. The world was a much simpler time, quote unquote, but there's still challenges. So it was particularly a challenging time for myself. I think just a very quick, my personal story was my husband and myself have to be separated in 2 different continents because he was, he is British. So I was in China, he came back to the UK and we were waiting for my visa application. And we thought it's a 6 months process, but it took 18 months. So it was very, very challenging in the sense that we've been married till then 7 years. We always lived together. And we have this really deep bond, and it was really hard to adjust not having each other in our lives. So personally, I think that's one of the lowest points in our life. If you guys know my husband, so if you talk to him, he would probably say the same thing. And for me, I just realized I need to get help because I wasn't happy. And through working with a coach, I gained so much clarity, so much so that I wanted to get into the business. I was like, I want to do that. I love working with people. I loved seeing people changes for the better. So yeah, that's how I got into it. It's one of those cliche stories.
It's often the way, though, with coaching. Quite often, somebody is coached by an individual and they create that bond and they realize it awakens them to the fact that, you know what, I could do this. I think a lot of people have got into coaching in that respect, coaching or training or consulting or mentoring or speaking or authoring. They're all part of those areas, that we know. But I think particularly with coaching is the case.
Yeah.
And with your sales background, it makes sense that you're coaching salespeople a lot. Yes.
I know how they feel. I know the struggles. I know the stress, especially if you work in certain corporations environments. It's a high pressure, very unforgiving environment. So I've been myself. So I spent the past several years really working on my credentials because I really believe to be a best anything, you really need to go to certain trainings, certifications. Steve, you probably are expert in that, the ISO for coaching. I don't think it exists yet, but I think they should.
I think they've got an ISO in experience rather than an ISO in qualifications.
That's important too. Well, you can't have, I guess, if you're lucky, you can have lots and lots of clients at the beginning and gain those experiences. But credentials is part of them, isn't it? I guess.
Credibility as well as credentials, yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, this is just you and me talking now. Moon can't hear us talking, but I think what she's really saying is that you and I are old and we've got lots of experience.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that might be what
I think there was an underlying theme there, wasn't there?
Yeah, yes, but it's a good job I whispered that to you. I don't think she heard me. It's okay.
No.
We'll carry on.
Otherwise she'd have been embarrassed, wouldn't she? I think, yeah.
Well, guys, I would just tell you.
Yes, you would. That's true. Somewhere here, I've just noticed that one of our friends, Dave, is also coming on in now. So let's just let.
While you're doing that, shall I ask Moon another question? Moon,
Yeah.
Moon, you said about the challenge and the difficulties of being away from your husband for so long, and then you got together. One of the issues, one of the fun parts I used to have when I used to spend so long overseas was you kind of got used to being away from each other. And then you had the getting back together and cramping each other's style. How difficult was it for you to adjust when you did get back together, having sort of learned to cope with the opposite effect?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was very strange. Not to mention 18 months later, there was a pandemic and we were both working from home. So we were together 24/7 constantly. It's challenging because it's not just physical space, but it's also mental space. It's also for my husband, it's re-entering the British society. So in a way, it's like a second wave of cultural shock. For me, is not so much a cultural shock, but really just getting into a different kind of living. Because life here in Stourbridge is completely different from the huge city I used to live, Shenzhen, next to Hong Kong. I'm sure, Steve, you know. So
Yeah.
I think it's a huge learning curve for both of us. And we just have to find way to adjust to each other. We just celebrated our 10 years anniversary last year. I think we're doing okay. We haven't killed each other yet. I haven't killed him, to be precise. So yeah, but thank you for it's a tough one.
Steve, you know full well that what really has happened is that he's doing as he's told. It's straightforward.
Probably. Yeah.
He does not do what he's told. He thinks it, but no, he's such a rebel.
Oh, fair enough. Dave has joined us.
Hey,
Hi. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Hi there.
I've got a bit of a cold, but I'm otherwise
But
okay.
It's not man flu.
Well, I'm up and I'm talking. If it was man flu, I wouldn't be able to make it. I'd be in bed somewhere. So yeah, no, I'm good. How are you all? You okay?
Yeah, we're all good. We're just sharing about Moon's experience and stuff. So, and I'm conscious that Moon has to run off in about a few minutes. So, Dave, we'll get to talk to you a bit and then share with everybody about what you do and how you do it and stuff. But
Cool.
if I may, just carry on a little bit with Moon for that. Two things then in that case, Moon. One is, what's the key areas that you help people with? What's the results that people get?
That's a really good question. A lot of the professionals I work with have imposter syndrome. They came to me and they're like, I have imposter syndrome. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't know why I'm doing this position. So I guess by working with a coach, what would happen is you have more confidence. You have more, like what Steve said, reminding us, you have more resilience. So you are more at ease with work. And the second thing, like I mentioned, is really work-life balance. So you know when to switch on, when to switch on. And when you are actually switched on, you are properly working. So you are not just spending a lot of the mental energy worrying, obsessing over things that you can't change, etc. So it's really about having better control of your mind. And I guess hopefully the end result is just to be happier. And, Dave and I talk about this often, is to live a purpose-driven life. You're not necessarily just, going through every day like drifting in the water, but you wake up and you feel empowered and you feel like, okay, I love my life. I want to live this, to the fullest. So yeah, those are the big pictures that I look at working with the clients.
And when you're working with people like that, does it matter of their age or their background?
Wow, that's a really good question. Are you introducing me clients?
Yeah, I'll do my best. All right. I'm trying for you. Okay.
Thank you very much. I would say typically my clients would be from late 20s to 40s. Like I said, just high achieving sales professions. A lot of them are newly promoted sales managers, sales executive. They're not necessarily binded to a team, but they do have a contract. So they do have, quota to hit. And yeah, typically they're quite stressed out. And one of the things they keep saying to me is, I have no time. I have no time to do this. Like they always say they didn't even have time for the session we have together. Very often they're like, I don't really have time for this. So I have no time is the mantras that they live by. So yeah, I think if you look at them, it feels like they're being pushed by this invisible wave and they don't really know what's going on in their lives. And a lot of time the health suffers, the relationship at home suffers, because ultimately, as I'm sure as a family businessman, you know that ultimately what really, really is important to us is right in front of us. But we tend to ignore that when we are so bogged down in our life, in our work.
It's particularly true with salespeople. Salespeople are quite often misunderstood. You know, I started life in sales. I ran sales teams, sales divisions, all that stuff. And salespeople are very high or very low with very little in the middle. You know, they're either high because they're flying, or they're phenomenally low because it's not working, and that can be on a daily basis, not an annual basis. So providing help in that area, I think, for any salesperson who understands it, and you do because of your background, make huge difference. I'm conscious of time. You've only got a couple of minutes left. We have Dave Jones with us. Dave and yourself are going to be co-hosting our new significant interest group in personal development, aren't you? So we'll get Dave to talk about that more in a minute. But for you, Moon, what is it for you that got you to say, yes, I'll do this, and what are you excited about with it? Besides working with Dave, by the way, I do. Yeah, obviously, okay.
Of course.
Reason why I say yes. Well, the special interest group is really interesting because it's about personal development. It's about something that I'm very, very, very passionate about. Because without personal motivations, how do we improve? How do we improve our life? How do we improve society? So I think we are doing a noble things. Also, I'm a huge fan of the family business practice.
Bless you.
Thank you, Peter. What I found is just a really friendly environment, especially for coaches or consultants or whoever that's new to the industry. I think it gives you such a great platform to practice what you preach and to meet people, to connect with like-minded people, to build that relationship that we all need. So it's not about selling. It's not about like, hey, please sign up for the program. Do you guys not feel like in January, everybody's trying to sell you something?
Oh, yeah.
I felt like I'm just inundated with things that I need to buy, and people are selling me all sorts of things. So that's not the kind of environment that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a family. We're trying to create a community, and ultimately, a safe place for people to be themselves and to grow. So yeah, I'm excited.
Couldn't have put that better myself, but I couldn't put it anything like as good as that. So I really appreciate that.
Put it in later. Don't worry.
We'll get Dave to see if we can do an equivalent in a bit. But there you go.
I'm just copying what Dave said.
I'm just gonna say what Moon said. That's it. I don't need to say anything
She's
more.
pinched the lines, Dave. Don't worry, we'll think of something. Finally, because I know you've got about a minute or so, remind everybody how they can get hold of you, website, what have you.
Yeah, so my website is lunacoaching.com, and you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is Moon Lee, and that's it. And
obviously we can find you through the practice anyway, can't we?
Well, I spoke about the presentations in April, so I need to get around it. I feel like I'm receiving a lot of emails from you, Peter.
Yes, it's called January. January means lots of emails. It does every year. I'm trying really hard not to send lots of emails out, but I haven't got any choice. at the minute. So there you go. I promise not to send you an email at 9 o'clock again, though. All right.
Okay, don't worry. Well, you set up a special, like a VIP inbox for all your emails to go to.
Quite right, too. Quite right, too. All right. Well, I think you're going to run off. So we'll say, Moon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Steve. It's good to see you. Well, I'm sure.
All right. Good to see you. We'll see you soon. All right.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
And so now there's three of us, Steve.
Back to 3.
Yeah, and for Dave's benefit, although it won't convert on the radio, if he thought Moon was sitting with an ice cream on her head, don't worry, Dave's Peter's already taken the photo of it, so you won't miss out on it completely.
Steve was insistent and we took the ice cream pictures. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I miss all the fun.
Oh, well, never mind. I'm sure we'll make some fun now. I'm sure we'll be fine. So obviously we're on radio. So let's just remind everybody. Dave, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
I'm Dave. I'm Dave James. I am a coach. I'm a mentor and a speaker. And I'm not going to say professional speaker because Peter will come up and he'll lynch me because it's the worst thing to say when Peter is a proper speaker. I essentially work with people who are awesome but don't realize they're awesome, and then great things happen. I have conversations with people for a living, which is brilliant. So I started off in healthcare, moved across into coaching healthcare business owners, mostly around business in inverted commas and air quotes, and marketing. But then over the last 12 months, realized that I preferred the people over the business and started to look more into mindfulness, meditation, and personal life coaching. So it's been a bit of a change over the last 12 months during COVID. And a lot of that is because that's the stuff which has helped me to grow and develop over the last few years. That's me.
Why don't we tell everybody about your, people always ask questions about, well, Dave was in healthcare, wasn't he? Well, I mean, Dave used to do all that stuff. And of course, at the minute, it's pretty topical, I think, as we record this in January 2022. It is still pretty damn topical. So, I mean, you went into what part of healthcare? What got you into there? Tell us the journey a bit about how you ended up in, where you are now. So
I've just today actually been filling out an application form for a trustee position with a UK-based charity. I don't know whether I'll get it, but I'm just going to put my CV. I had to do a CV, which is I've not done one of those for about 50 years. So I've put my CV and a covering email into the mix, and what will happen will happen. But I was going back and kind of selling myself in a way and saying, why is it you'd want me as a trustee? What is it I can offer? And one of the figures which came up is that, I've got 26 years of experience of being in healthcare. And I started off working in a nursing home. It was an accidental job where I'd left home in August, September of 94, didn't have a job. I'd done a college course or a university course, which I'd failed and I wasn't going to go back. And so I ended up on a Tuesday, the Tuesday after I'd moved out, going into this nursing home. They said, would you like to come along for a shift? Me going, yes, why not? Going along on the Wednesday for the shift. By the Thursday, I was working there, and I worked there for 2 years. And the next step for me was, well, I can't do this for the rest of my career. What's the next step up? And the next step up was train to be a nurse. So I went off and trained to be a nurse between probably 96, 97 and 2000, because I started the course and didn't enjoy where I was and came back. So I had to start it again. Qualified as a nurse 2000, worked medical admissions, then went to Oxford and worked A&E for 3 years. And then while I was doing that, realized that I had a diploma in nursing, not a degree, and I wanted to up it and just didn't have the skills to do it. So actually went off and retrained as a podiatrist. And clinically, I've been a podiatrist for most of my healthcare career. Did that from 2007 when I qualified. So the degree was 2004 to 2007. Worked for the NHS in Dudley, the NHS in Walsall, then went into my own business, which I'd started in 2010 and worked in there for 8 years before selling it, and decided that I wanted to go into coaching and mentoring. So sold my business in 2018. And kind of to add to that healthcare mix, there's also a master's degree in biomechanics, which was a fun 3 years. I'm on a charity for voluntary foot care called Forgotten Feet, where we provide voluntary and homeless foot care across the UK, all with volunteers in hostel locations. And I've taught undergraduate podiatrists as well at degree level. So I've when I start looking at all of this stuff, I'm like, you have done a bit, mate, haven't you? You've got some skill there, and you forget about it because you live it day to day. But yeah, been around healthcare for over a quarter of a century now.
I know I've asked you this question before, and I know what the answer is, but for people listening, what got you into feet?
Well, yeah, that is the story, isn't it? So, born with spina bifida, and for those of you who are on radio, you will not see the picture behind me on my shelf, which is me as a baby, and you can see quite clearly on that picture where my left foot was twisted over because I had a club foot as well as my spina bifida, and so I had surgery as a 4-year-old for both my foot problem and my back problem, and it was fine. It was fine gave me a foot which worked, gave me a back which worked, probably until I was 20, and then about that time where I left home and started working in the nursing home, I had a foot ulcer develop. And that was the first time I came across these mythical creatures called podiatrists. And I still remember the practice nurse, Margaret, at my local surgery in Hagley saying to me, I can't treat this. She said, I can't do much more with it. I'm going to have to refer you to a podiatrist. And I went, a what? A what? Don't they work with children? And it's quite funny, being a podiatrist now, although not practicing much clinically, that people still get the name confused and still think you're a pediatrician, which is very, very confusing. So I started off my podiatry career and my knowledge of podiatry on the opposite side of the couch. I was the one sat on the couch being treated, not the one sat treating somebody on the couch. And I think that's really useful. It gives you a level of empathy which you can only get when you've been in that position. When you've been treated when you've been a patient in that environment, you get a very, very different view of what's going on. And that for me has been really valuable. It's not essential to have that, but it's been really valuable. And I think that's really helped me out during my healthcare career.
Don't you think, Steve, that applies to business as well? You can be working for a company doing all sorts of stuff, but until you run your own business, you don't have a clue really, do you?
Yeah.
No, and I think that's the bit with respect to the people who do it. That's the bit people miss out, because you can understand the theory, but you've got to be in the mindset to execute the theory in the first place, and the state of mind to do it, and the imposter bit that Moon said, and all the rest of it. Another one of my expressions: business is simple, complicated by people. Well, the bloke who said that originally meant at the time the customers and the suppliers and the people who worked for him, but it's now more and more prevalent that the business is simple, complicated by people, can be yourself, and that's a bit deep and meaningful and philosophical. And I noticed, incidentally, Dave, I've noticed a change in the way you've been over the last 3 years, and an easy example, which I'll point out because it is on radio and people won't see it, is you would have never had the words Big Dave on the bottom of your screen before. You'd have never been brave enough and bold enough to call yourself Big Dave, would you?
Yeah, and you're right, and that only came about probably, I was going to say earlier this year, but it's not. It's now 2022. So in sort of April, May of last year, when the picture of me up on the shelf behind me is me at 7.5 months old. Because a lot of the struggles that I've had and a lot of the work I've done through my personal development has been to try and help with the stuff which happened to me during childhood. And, I've got stories of death of friends at school and things like that. And there's been this huge part of me needing to go back in my past and give myself huge amounts of love. So the bit in the past which needs love is Little Dave, and the bit now in the future is Big Dave. And we could talk about archetypes and powerful positions and all that kind of stuff, but Big Dave is I suppose in some ways, he's my warrior. He's the one who turns up and gets stuff done. So yeah, and I wouldn't have put it out there, and I wouldn't be sat here with a scarf on and a moustache and in January and doing all these things as well. It's been a huge change for me around confidence, and that comes from that personal development.
Yeah.
It was a good observation.
No, I think it's an excellent observation. I think you're not alone over the last 2 years of how people have got a very different viewpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some positives from COVID. Obviously, there are a lot of negatives, but there are some positives. And I think one of the key ones are, there are amounts of people who have really said, you know what, my life's not right. I need to fix it. We need to do things differently. Or I'm biased towards family, as we all know. But I think people have looked a lot closer at themselves and those close to them, and to say, okay, what is it I really want to do, or let's do things differently or in a different way. And of course, in their family businesses, they've then approached that in the same way. They've approached their staff in the same way, the people that are close to them. Because as we know, family businesses, if you employ staff, they're an extended family anyway, you know. And their staff have been saying, well, okay, let's look at things differently. I know in our own family business, you know, one of our ladies retired just slightly earlier than she could have done, but you know, she got to a point where she said, you know what, I'm kind of done. I'm kind of done. And you know what, it's great. And she's, you know, I saw it, you know, post Christmas, she's very happy, and she's relaxed into things because she said, you know what, let's do something different. I think it's interesting. I think you're a measure of that in some ways, Dave. So
Yeah.
You know, so you did all that stuff. You went into podiatry. You ran your own business. You found that dead easy, didn't you?
I wish. But do you know, when I first went into it, you don't know what you don't know, and I think ignorance is bliss, and it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know, there's that cutoff point where Dunning-Kruger talked about the fact that people who kind of lack self-awareness are also come along with huge amounts of confidence because you don't know what you don't know. But as soon as you suddenly have that self-awareness, your confidence dips because you know how big the world is and what troubles are out there. And I swear that, you know, when I started the business, it was with a friend of mine at the time, and there's a whole story around what happened there. But we started it off from the place of, yeah, we've got this, we're podiatrists, we've got degrees, we've worked for the NHS, we're qualified, we'll set up shop and people will go, we know what you do, we'll come and see you. And it was like, no one really cared. And it was a huge slog, you know, learning how to market, learning what the voice of the business was, learning what we did and what we didn't do. And certainly in the early days, we did everything to do with feet and legs. It was, do you have feet and legs? Are they a problem? We can treat it. And we would just throw ourselves into everything. So, and then you realize you haven't got the skills to treat half the stuff you're seeing. And then when you get the skills to treat all of the stuff that you're seeing, you realize that 80% of it you don't enjoy doing anyway. But by that point, you're kind of in your business and you need that 80% as well. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I look back on it now and kind of chuckle about it. And I know at the time that I went through a fair amount of stress at various points while working it all out. And I think that's the same for pretty much the majority of people who have their own business and family businesses.
Yeah,
Well, sorry, Steve, go on.
It's the people element and the psychological element, like you said, which can link the two. Because when people come in to see you with your podiatry hat on, you were probably already thinking, well, I know how to fix the foot. What I can't help you with as much is the psychology of coping with it with your club foot and things like that. And I worked with a company 20 years ago who designed bespoke wheelchairs and motorized mobility aids. And he said, you know, I can help people get around, but whether they can cope with being in a wheelchair is a different level of expertise. And, you know, in business, all three of us can help people. We can identify the problem fairly easily. And then it's building the mental capacity and the mental structure around it to enable people to implement it, isn't it? And that's, I suppose, where yours come in terms of those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think back to some of the conversations that I would have with patients, and quite a lot of my time was spent around expectations. So it was, yeah, you've got this physical problem, and we can sort that for you, but you know, what's the implication of you not working with me to fix this? Why is it important that we fix this? And how much of the work are you actually going to do? And I always remember drawing this big continuum on the board. And on one side, it was, if you follow all of my advice to the letter, you'll get better quicker. If you follow none of my advice, you'll get better, but you'll get better much slower. And the difference is it will cost you less if you listen to me, and it will cost you more if you don't. And I'd say to them, whereabouts do you want to play? Because if you're listening to all of my advice and working really, really hard and having to back off on the things you want to do, I said, you're going to get better, but you're not going to enjoy it. But you want that flexibility, then you've got to know what the pros and cons are. And it was amazing when you gave people a choice and you were completely honest with them. how well they would respond, because there's no comeback. If you say to you say to me as a patient, I'm not going to listen to your advice to the letter. I'll listen to about 25% of it. You know that they're going to take longer to heal. But you can say to them, well, we had this conversation before. And so a lot of the time it was spent educating, working on expectations, dealing with that psychology. But I only learned that through trial and error. I only learned that through seeing what did work and what didn't work, and what patients got better quicker and why they did compared to someone else. And that was a lot of that didn't really apply in my NHS role. My NHS role was very much, here's the service and I deliver it. If you want it, brilliant. If you don't want it, off you go. Private was very different. You were working to some very different demons, and it was a very interesting place to kind of play, and big learning curve.
Do you think in many ways that's where you started to learn to be a coach effectively in some ways?
Yeah, I think, that's a brilliant question. I think for me, when I started being coached in 2015, and started to do my personal development, I started to see the change in me. I was, instead of being this passenger in the back of a car where all the windows are blacked out, suddenly I was in the front seat, and I was watching the driver, and I was watching what they did, and then suddenly I could take the wheel and I could have a go. I think there's always been an element of kind of coach in me, or maybe more mentor in me anyway, even as far back as my first nursing job, working at Dudley Road in Birmingham. I can remember working with students and enjoying that process of helping them using the knowledge that I'd got. So I'm probably even going back to when I was a care assistant in nursing home as well, back in sort of 94 to 96, working with new people and feeling very comfortable in taking them by the hand and walking it through with them. So I think it's always been there to some degree. It's just now I formalize it with a title and a snappy LinkedIn profile.
So you ended up selling the business.
Yeah.
I bet that was fun.
It was like someone had lifted a weight off my shoulders. It was interesting, and thinking back to the energy at that time and my thoughts at that time, I'd had a coaching session with one of my coaches at the time, Chris. And Chris is a huge influence on me in terms of the mindfulness stuff. Anyway, he's done a lot of stuff around Buddhism and Buddhist retreats and that kind of stuff. And he asked me, I'd started working with him and his cousin, and I was working towards creating a coaching practice anyway. And he said to me, well, what is it you want to do? And I said, I want to coach more. And he said, okay, how can you do that? And I said, well, I could do less hours in clinic. I said, or I could sell my business. And that selling the business just kind of fell out. It was just like that came from nowhere. And that was it was like May the 18th of 2018. And I went, I can sell the business. And the business was actually, I put an advert in on some podiatry groups that evening, and I'd clicked send and off it went. And it took 6 months until actually all the documents were signed and all the bank details and everything were handed over. But I was ready to walk away from that business at the end of the year. If it hadn't have sold, I probably would have stepped away from it anyway, because I was just ready to get out of it. And I needed that. I needed to almost burn the bridges of it. I needed to have that separation. And I still remember that energy now, remembering how I say desperate. And desperate's not the word. How determined I was to make that change. And I look at it now and think that was a bit of a foolish thing to do. Good business, bringing in good income. Could I have done it in a different way? And to be honest, I don't think I could have done it a different way. I think it was exactly the right way to do it.
Steve, you've had experience of helping people to move their businesses on or expand their businesses. Have you found that that's been the case with people that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think everybody has points that they reach, and the link with all of these is that the first small step is the biggest one. And once they take that first small step, then they get a bit more confident and they drive it and they do it. But you're right. I always ask everybody I ever meet who started a company, I always ask them why they started and whether there was a trigger point, whether they were pushed by somebody, whether they fell out with somebody, whether something in their head suddenly told them that they hadn't got the energy or the enthusiasm to do it, or whether they didn't believe it anymore. And that's the fascination of it. And then you're right, sometimes you have to persuade people not to go into business on their own, because some people aren't cut out for it, and it's better to tell them because, you know, if they then still want to do it and then they find it doesn't work, then they go and take a job which they'd have never thought of before, but they needed to keep a roof over their head, then it would be better if they don't do that. So yeah, there's a lot of psychology behind running it. And let's face it, it isn't for everybody. It's all right having experiences, but you do have to come out of the other side to be able to enjoy them. You know, all those tales we all come up with about, oh, I remember whenever I was blackmailed in this country or whatever. They weren't amusing at the time. They weren't in any way fun at the time. But they're useful now because you need extremes to be able to make today's and tomorrow's problem way less bigger problem than it really is, really. You know, when the C word started, a number of people had to face for the first time that actually they weren't invoicing anything for several months. And yeah, that's pretty tough. But in stages of my company, even when it was supposedly a really good time, I had times where I didn't invoice anything for 6 months. So what the heck was the difference?
Yeah.
You know, and if I coped with it then I sure as heck cope with it now, because I'm better now than I was when it happened the first time.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
So yeah, there's lots of psychology on it, but you need somebody who you trust to be able to talk to it, and that's why this what we do can be so powerful, and it's good that you've been able to help people like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've just come off a call before coming on here, and I've got on my wall over there, I've got a master's degree I did in biomechanics. Now, I've put it up there just to remind me that it was hard work, and I was pulling 7-day weeks while working for the NHS and running my own business. I actually start another master's degree tomorrow, which I never thought I'd do another one, and I've gone into it. It's mindfulness and compassion, which is sitting very closely with where I'm aligned with at the moment, what I'm interested in. And my client, who I was talking to earlier today, just before I came on, I've been working with her a year now, and she's awesome. She's absolutely amazing. She's actually just applied to do a master's degree as well. And it's really interesting that 12 months ago, we would not have had that conversation about it. But because of the work which we've done together and the hard work she's put in and the way she's dealt with all of the things going on in her mind, she's now in a stable position where she can move forward. And one of the key things which came out of it for her was purpose. She had no real purpose before. She was getting up, she was doing the job, she was very good at it, but she was really just moving forward without purpose. And even though she couldn't articulate it, she could feel that quite deep down that she didn't have purpose. Now she does. Now she has something to work towards. And I think that's what a lot of people have found over the last 2 years, is they found that they either didn't have a purpose and they were just turning up and doing the motions, and they've gone out of their way to find a purpose. And that purpose looks very, very different to what they expected. And they've had to make some big decisions and some big choices and maybe upset a few people in the process of moving towards that purpose. And I love that. I love the courage which comes with saying, sod this, I don't want to do this job anymore. I want to do something different. That's really quite cool. And I get to play around with people doing that, and I love it. It's great fun.
Yeah, you need the Moon was talking about it earlier with helping people sleep. But the main thing is to have distractions from the thing that's keeping you awake, isn't it? Yeah. And if you can fill if what's keeping you awake is a bit of a negative, then fill it with stuff which is a distraction, which is exciting you, because without being theoretical on sleeping, because I can fall asleep before I'd even thought of the theory, to be honest. One of the on the days where it does take me more than 5 minutes and my mind is still wearing away, the method is you think of something that's exciting and different to take you, which it's a bit like the good antibodies overcoming the bad guys, which without using the C word, the government hasn't realized is the best way of solving it yet. But if you've got the good things to think about, you'll easily fall asleep and you'll have nicer dreams, and it'll switch your mind off the thing that's disturbing you in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Purpose, happiness, all of those things. And it's, I sleep pretty well at night. The only thing which tends to wake me up is some random thought about something where my brain decides it wants to talk to me. And then I just get a pad out and write it down.
Yeah, write it down, go back to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Write it down, go back to sleep. And it's normally waffle, but occasionally there's some gold in there, which makes it onto a social media post or I chat about it with a client, and it's usually good stuff. But yeah, you just have to get out of your head. But I remember I sleep much better now, even though I still run my own business. And actually, it's interesting that there are times where the feelings I had when running my podiatry business, which at times is quite stressful, will still plague me now. You don't get away from those. They just show up in a different way, and you're a different person. And what's the phrase? No man steps in the same river twice. And you're a different person at a different time. But I still remember the 4 a.m. wake ups where I got to bed about midnight after working hard on the business, and I'd wake up at 4 a.m. with this sense of dread. And then I'd have like a 12-hour day ahead of me, and with patients, and it'd be horrendous. And I only know what that's like because I've done that in my own business. Now, if I hadn't have run my own business, I'd have no idea at all. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do that now.
Yeah, I didn't realize at the time that I was doing something for a particular purpose, but mine was if I was awake for 2.5 weeks and I was doing 18 hours days, then you can easily be knackered, because actually you were knackered before you went. Before you got on the plane in the first place, with all the build up. And then there was the stress of actually meeting people. And there was an even bigger stress being relatively shy and meeting somebody on their place, not yours, and remembering all the things you're supposed to remember. So it just occurred to me that fundamentally a really good thing to be able to do was, wherever you got the chance to fall asleep, and plug yourself into the charger, as we would now call it, then you should become pretty good at it. So wherever you could, obviously not in the middle of a meeting, but anywhere in between. And it was really a challenge, so I'd come back from a meeting in the middle. Sometimes in the Middle East, they used to work 7:30 till 1 and then 3:30 till 4. So unwind after your 1 o'clock meeting, get ready for those. Hang on a minute, there's an hour and a half in there where you can absolutely fall asleep. Make sure you're bloody good at falling asleep, and then you can recover from it. And then, 40 years, 30 years later, you need to talk to that valuable person on behalf of a client, and you've got to catch them at 9 o'clock in the morning. The problem is that's 3 o'clock in the morning your time, or 4 a.m. Well, you've got a choice. You can either do the meeting and stay awake for the rest of the day and ruin your afternoon because you can barely keep your eyes open, or you can train yourself to fall asleep for 2 or 3 hours and then get back up at your usual time and you're okay. Now, people in the UK ought to train themselves, or try and train themselves to do that, because then they'll be really, really effective. But we joked with Moon Lee earlier about her techniques. And if somebody had booked a 2-hour call and somebody was asleep after 5 minutes, and she sat there on her own for 1 hour and 55 minutes, like you said earlier, you've got to find a way of people paying for it. Because they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, Dave, I paid for 2 hours of your time. That's cost me all that money. I fell asleep after the first 5 minutes. I don't want to pay you all of that.
Well, I see you could just turn around and say that's your problem, and or you could say I fixed you.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And that opens up a whole kind of discussion around, whose responsibility is it to get anything from a coaching session? Is it the coach's responsibility to take somebody somewhere, or is it the client's responsibility to get the insight that they need? And I'd say probably there's somewhere in the middle. And one of the things I ask my clients is, what's your insight from today? What have you got from it, which you can then take on and you can use? Because I think people come into a coaching session and pay good money for it, and what they look for is for this amazing shift in their being. They almost want to come into the session as person A and go out as person B, and it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that at all. But when you start to look at the shifts over time and it's the way people leverage it, it does make a difference. And that hour and 55 minutes of sleep might be exactly what that person needed to then go off and have a meeting with somebody fresh, and then make a really good business decision and make 10 million. So
most times it's the law of marginal gains.
Yeah, exactly. So Dave Brailsford.
That's as in business in general.
Yeah, it's not about big shifts. It's about the 1% you can change on as many things as possible. And Dave Brailsford is just so Dave Brailsford and the Sky team's amazing on that. Yeah, and Formula One as well, which I know, lover of Formula One. It's the little changes they make on wings and wheel nut weights and weight of the driver.
Huge difference. Huge difference. If you just look at wheel nuts, if you look at what they have and how they do it and how much those things are, and the weight saving in it is minuscule, but it all adds up. That's the point. And the money adds up. I'm conscious of time. We're not so far away from the end, I think, Steve. Dave, remind everybody principally the benefits of people talking to you. Remind everybody how they can get hold of you.
Benefits of talking to me is you get the opportunity to have somebody show you how amazing you are and to mirror that back to you, because quite often we don't see how amazing we are as people, and we hold ourselves back. So it's a space to feel safe so you can express yourself, so that you can then go out into the world and express yourself and feel safe. That's the principal benefit. And I always joke that people, I have conversations with people, and that's really the basis of it. And it is. We have conversations, and it's a safe space for you. If you want to get in touch with me, www.davethecoach.co.uk. I am on LinkedIn. I think it's I am Dave James, and that should be the same for Twitter and Instagram. And you can find me as well on, I think it's iamdavejames.co.uk as part of Facebook. But yeah, principally www.davethecoach.co.uk, and there's phone numbers and emails on there as well.
Thanks for that, Dave. And I guess the last point is, I mean, obviously Moon eloquently told everybody about the SIG group within the practice for personal development. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm looking forward to it. Not just because of Moon's energy. We spoke earlier in the week and did some recording for it, and I think we'd spoken for an hour and then went, oh, we got this recording, haven't we? Because the energy was just brilliant. So as you could imagine, the two of us together.
Yes.
I'm really excited for it because, as Moon said, I mean, I love the family business practice, and I must have been in it now 5 years, 5 years, and although it started off for me as a networking group, it's not networking, it's relationships, and it's relationships and community, and that for me is very, very powerful. And what you've created is just amazing, and I love being part of it. Family businesses are unique. They are totally unique. They are about people rather than about systems and processes, and that's at the core of it. And I think what we're going to be doing in the special interest group is helping people in those family businesses to see how, coaching, mentoring, speaking, consultancy can help them, but also bringing other coaches in as well, and other consultants and mentors to come in so that they can be introduced to just how amazing family businesses are. Plus bringing coaches together to have a nice space together, because I think quite often coaches look at each other as competition instead of looking at each other from another C word, collaboration, and seeing that, my approach is different to Moon's approach, which is different to other coaches' approaches. And actually one coach does not suit every family business. So it's giving people the opportunity to play with that. So I'm really excited. And I'm really excited to see what people want to bring along and talk about. I'm really excited I think the first session we're doing some meditation as part of that. So I'm really excited to introduce things to people where they might have ordinarily said, nah, that ain't for me, and just play with it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, it will be, I think. I was just going to ask Steve, any last thoughts, Steve?
No, I think it's been a good example of that. And I half joked about it before, but Dave knows that I know him well enough to have made the observation. I think it shows that by some of these things, you can go from little Dave or just Dave to big Dave in your mindset.
Yeah.
Or to balance it out, little Jane to big Jane, or not even calling yourself by your proper name because you want to hide behind it because for insecurity reasons. And that's where some of these bits come out. So it's useful for that.
Yeah, I should maybe ought to become the artist formerly known as Dave. Maybe that's the way forward.
Oh, excellent.
That'd be good for radio if you did. And then we could play an accidentally Prince tune, couldn't we?
It could do.
Maybe we'll do that anyway.
Yeah, that's an idea. Steve, I'll leave you to close the session.
So thanks to both of you. That's going to, looking forward to hearing that back, because we've just been talking amongst ourselves with Moon Lee as well, haven't we? And really good session. And look forward to the next monthly version of the Family Business Practice on Black Country Extra.